This is the How Did We Get Here podcast with your host, Nancy Jackson.
Hi, I'm Nancy Jackson, and this is the How Did We Get Here podcast, where we try to connect the dots and figure out if there are some connections with things that are going on in our world politically, economically, culturally, and spiritually. And this is part 2 of an interview that I have with Dr. Mary Byrne. And before we begin the second part here, I just had a few things that I wanted to say. First of all, I better talk about Mary a little bit and tell you again that she is the co-founder of the Coalition Against Common Core in Missouri. And she is also a PhD in education, and her specialty and training and experience is in Common Core and critical race theory and social emotional education. But in order to get to that, I had a lot of questions as she was explaining things in the first part of this interview. And what I came to realize is that there is no such thing as a short explanation. There is no such thing as 2 sentences to explain something. Everything is a long story. And in order to get to the full meaning of something, we have to go back and look at the background and what has led us to this point. And I had a lot of questions myself, and one of them was who is behind all of these initiatives that have been introduced into our culture and our education? Who is behind them, and where's the money coming from? That's all, they always say follow the money. And I kind of use that as a, not that it might sound a little jaded, but often it will lead you to the people who are calling the shots and making things happen. So that is what I wanted to get into today. And unfortunately, to get to the answers, we have to listen to the background first. And so I wanted to explain that before Mary starts her more detailed explanation, because you will be amazed to see how things are connected. Maybe you already suspected things, but I think that you will be, maybe confirmed in your thoughts, and this might fill in some blanks for you. And anyway, I hope that it has some meaning for you and that you will enjoy it. So I want to go ahead and start part 2. And I'm very happy that she agreed to spend a little time with us today. And her name is Dr. Mary Byrne. And she has a doctorate in special education. She's a national speaker and an education issues consultant, especially when it comes to Common Core standards and critical race theory and social emotional learning. She co-founded Missouri's Coalition Against Common Core in 2013. And since then, she's been working to educate legislators and school board members and the public about the fundamental transformation of the American education system under progressive administrations. And that doesn't mean one political party or another. It's just if somebody has a certain agenda that they're pushing, it becomes very obvious. And she is really on the alert for things that are going to really change our educational system. And she sounds a loud warning against that. So anyway, I would like to introduce Dr. Byrne and let her explain how she arrived at these activities that she's involved in, and just her history and her background, and where she is today. So please welcome Dr. Mary Byrne.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the invitation to be on your podcast. And as I recall, it was a Phyllis Schlafly event where we had met. I recently, meaning April, I had an article published in the Education Reporter online through the Phyllis Schlafly organization. And last year in April, I also had, actually, it wasn't just one article. The entire issue was content that I had written. So last year it was focusing on the Great Britain American collaboration of the elites through the British Fabian Society to infiltrate the American education system at all grade levels, K-12 and the universities. It started at the universities, but our progressive philosopher, John Dewey, was very instrumental, very engaged with these British Fabian socialists, and instrumental in incorporating that into our education organizations that eventually lobbied for the kinds of policies that we have at Washington, D.C. The more recent article, April of 2024, was dedicated to the 60th anniversary of Phyllis Schlafly's book, A Choice, Not an Echo. And so it particularly focuses on the Rockefeller connection between the British Fabian Society and the transformation of the American education system, particularly through the efforts of Nelson Rockefeller and his brother David. So what the reason those two articles are companion articles and a kind of sequence of history is that the British Fabian Society was the society that envisioned and operationalized the plans for global socialism run by intellectual elites. And there were British elites, intellectual elites, and there were American intellectual elites. So familiar names on this side of the pond were John Dewey and Walt Whitman, and the Rockefellers. The truth is that they funded the London School of Economics to develop that school's economic theory and promulgate it throughout the world, and then sent David Rockefeller over there to learn from at the feet of the Fabian socialists in that school, and also to learn at the University of Chicago, which John D. Rockefeller funded. So David then became the president of Chase Bank, which formerly had been led by his uncle. So it was all a family affair. And Nelson Rockefeller was set up. Now, both of these men were the children of John D. Rockefeller II. So it wasn't necessarily their grandfather, John D. Rockefeller, was the founder of Standard Oil, that was the source of all of the money that was going to become part of the Rockefeller legacy. John D. Rockefeller II wasn't the businessman his father was, but he decided that he was a good administrator of the so-called philanthropic distribution of that money. And I say so-called philanthropic because it wasn't charity. It wasn't the kind that the scriptures describe, where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. That money was directed to fund certain projects that shaped the American education system, in particular, the General Education Board. And in the early 1900s, that board was set up to fund projects in the South to educate the children of freed Black slaves. But it had a particular agenda. It wasn't the liberal arts education that Jefferson had written about and envisioned as the education of a free people for self-governance. Rockefeller envisioned workforce development, and in particular, keeping the Blacks down in the South and on the farms so that they would not migrate up to the North, join the unions of the industries in the North, and perhaps start to control politics and Northern policy. His vision was to control what he viewed as a problem. In learning how to distribute grants and position people who were sympathetic to his agenda in the South, then the Rockefeller Foundation that was set up used the grant-making system for shaping education in universities, for shaping personnel development so that teachers coming out of universities like the University of Chicago, where Dewey was, and Columbia University, where Dewey went, that money began to, I guess the word again is to shape the thinking, the goals of education for the social transformation of the country. These projects were very instrumental in promoting progressivism, which is John Dewey is known as the father of progressive education, which is aligned with social reconstruction, not the honoring of individual freedom. And when you understand that Karl Marx's daughter, Eleanor Marx, was intimately involved with the Fabian Socialists in England, and that Marx himself lived in London and had interaction with the Fabian Socialists, you understand the Marxist influence in that Fabian Socialist agenda. Marx believed in quick, bloody, violent revolution overturning, and the Fabian Socialists believed in the permeation into government, into institutions of culture, gaining control through legislation, which is what we're observing now in the United States. And the Rockefellers became experts at doing this. So where John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil captured the Secretary of State's office to open doors for his global marketing of Standard Oil, David Rockefeller used the same strategies in opening the world market for Chase Bank. A particular country of focus for them was China. And the grandson of John D. Rockefeller, whose name was John D. Rockefeller III, had a particular affinity for China and began the Asia Society there. This is all to set up a conceptualization of the history so that we understand the development of China was a Rockefeller project. The influence of communist China's education agenda and the building of China economically was all part of the Rockefeller agenda. What they wanted was globalism, and what they wanted was a country they could control with their socialist ideas. So that influence of the Asian society on what is now recognized as Common Core in this country, it came from China's standards and accountability that they had in their own country, but it was also largely a part of Great Britain, the original home of the British Fabian Society. Britain had a national education system. It had a committee for common curriculum for the entire nation. And what we have to understand is that the Pearson Publishing Company is headquartered in London, that a particular figure became the go-to person for not just Pearson Publishing, but for the McKinsey Data Management Corporation. So what you have is Common Core state standards that are required for data gathering for a large population that has no boundaries, like local school districts or states or even a nation. Common Core was designed to be basically an international system of education, which is why you have to diminish American history, because not every country shares American history. Furthermore, you have to diminish American history because we can't have notions of individual freedom in a socialist society. So if we're going to make America socialist, we have to eliminate the ideas of individual liberty, which is what our Constitution at the national and at the state level were designed to protect. As a matter of fact, state constitutions were an outgrowth of the US Constitution, and they were so by design. But you have these elitists, particularly led by the Rockefellers, that undermined the stability of our Constitution and our American traditions in favor of a globalist vision, because John D. Rockefeller didn't like the unpredictability of free market. He wanted more of the predictability and control of a planned economy, and that's what socialism / communism offered. So he thought that was a good idea. And the money, the funds that were set up were to continue the legacy of those ideas. So when you have John D. Rockefeller's son, John D. Rockefeller II, siring 5 boys who, again, cooperated and coordinated in different ways the continuation of this globalist vision, you have Nelson Rockefeller enter politics and become the governor of the state of New York as a stepping stone for his ambition to become the president of the United States. He tried in 3 elections. This is what the latest article for the Online Education Reporter was about. He tried in 3 elections to get the Republican nomination for president. Now, take that in, the Republican nomination. And that's my point. Here is this socialist progressive seeking the nomination in the Republican Party. And basically, the Rockefellers controlled the Republican Party. And so the progressive ideas were not Democrat or Republican. As a matter of fact, when Nelson Rockefeller failed in his 3rd attempt to gain that Republican nomination, his brother David then set up an organization in 1973 called the Trilateral Commission. And that organization was totally controlled by David. It was an offshoot of the Bilderberger which is the elitist group, the globalist elitist group that was even controlling American politics. Phyllis Schlafly called them the kingmakers. He decided that he was going to do this new organization. The Bilderbergers had the Americas and Europe, but they didn't want the Asian countries. And as I already explained, the Rockefellers had a particular agenda for the Asian countries, China. So David Rockefeller, who was intimately involved in the Bilderbergers, established his own organization, the Trilateral Commission, the three being Europe, Asia, and North America. David had control of who he invited into his organization. And among the original members were Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. So once again, that's evidence that parties were not different because they were controlled by the same elitists. Okay. And what you had in those three administrations, because don't forget, Ronald Reagan was shot. It was George H.W. Bush, who was his vice president, and Bush's campaign manager, Jim Baker, became Reagan's chief of staff. So while Reagan's recuperating from gunshot wound, it's really Bush and his colleague James Baker who were in charge. So it was a Carter, Bush, Clinton administration.
Wow. I want to just stop you right there because I have so many questions.
Go ahead.
And we could jump down that rabbit hole with the Trilateral Commission, I know. And I did not realize the depth of the connections that you are describing here. It just blows my mind. But I want to go back to your role in informing different school boards and political organizations, warning them about the transformation of our educational system. And in particular, you mentioned critical race theory. How would that be connected to all of these things? I kind of know the answer, but I want to get your take on that. Why would you bring up, critical race theory at a time like this?
Okay, so we already established that the Common Core standards are needed for a global education system that is not for teaching self-governance, but for creating a workforce, a global economy workforce. What you need critical race theory for is to destabilize the current system. You need critical race theory to upend this idea that America is a land of opportunity and equality under the law. That is the essence of the criticism of critical race theory, is that in particular, people of color, in particular, Black freed slaves, never became equal, and therefore the Constitution is just a piece of paper. And as such, we need to upend that and have kids write their own version of a constitution. Let's go through that exercise where we're rewriting the Constitution. Okay, so that's actually an activity in the classrooms.
Yeah, is this kind of a Common Core thing where you're?
It is part of the socialist agenda.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, maybe a critical race theory. Okay, I get it. Yeah. I'm just asking. So go ahead.
Right. So no longer, if you want to introduce an international system of education for global workforce development, you've got to diminish this idea of differences in ability, of liberal arts for liberty, You've got to have a compliant workforce that's going to believe that the purpose of education is not education, but training for an economy. And that's all a socialist / communist agenda, because in those countries, people are not free. Humans are not individually sovereign. Humans are subjects. They are units in an economy run by the state.
So would that mean like a de-emphasis of the humanities?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why that's why in literature, you have a de-emphasis of great literature in favor of technical manuals for
Okay.
job training. Okay. And
Okay.
that's what Common Core is.
Oh,
Common Core
okay.
literature reduced the study of great literature,
Mhm.
which was actually teaching you about the human heart and
Right.
human behavior, so that you could recognize it and navigate it, really.
Yeah.
Literature,
It's a
in
form of
my mind,
dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing.
absolutely. You
Yeah.
are now a unit, a human
Yes,
resource unit
that's right.
in a planned economy. And
Mm.
once you are no longer useful, we eliminate you. That's why they need a healthcare system driven by the government, where if you're disabled at early ages of life, we provide comfort for your demise. And
Absolutely.
if you are no longer useful as an elderly person, we provide comfort for your demise. But we
They
don't
call
take
them the
care of you.
useless eaters. The useless
Exactly.
eaters. Yes.
And that was George Bernard Shaw
Oh, golly.
description. And
Yeah.
George Bernard Shaw was one of the founders of the British Fabian Society.
Wow.
Okay. This is all
Yeah.
connected.
Yes,
Okay.
it certainly is.
You got the healthcare system and you got this education system. The education system is no longer education, it's job training. And you
Yes.
got a health system that says we cannot bear the burden of losing profit through medical expenses.
Yes.
So we're going to train our workers. If they're no longer physically capable of
Mhm.
participating in our profit making, we're going to eliminate that
Mhm.
and create a utopian society where everybody's healthy, not because we have advances in medicine, but because we eliminated the unhealthy.
Yes. I get it. This is why when we sat next to each other at that dinner, I thought, wow, this woman has pushed a lot of buttons that resonate with me. And I just have to talk to her more because she is a deep reservoir of knowledge and information. And unfortunately, we are running out of time today, but I sure would like to have you come back another day and we will dive into this again because in a way, this is kind of what my book is about. It's like I start on one subject and it leads to another and then to another.
Sure.
So you have
Yeah.
been a wonderful resource. And
So
I
just as a teaser, then you
yeah,
also has to eliminate religion and faith that's going to honor the individual.
absolutely.
And you have to have social emotional learning for a code of so-called morality that is not God-centered. Do you
Absolutely.
understand the connection then between all of this? That's
Absolutely.
what they're
Because,
doing.
well, my book is about, and my podcast is about, my main statement is that politics, economics, culture, and religion are all connected.
Sure.
And you have to have all of those as far as, you know, the world that we live in is made up, and you cannot separate one from the other. And you can't say, well, you know, the separation of church and state, that is used as an excuse for blocking of things that are really about morality, about right and wrong and virtue and vice. And anyway, I don't want to rattle on about this because it's mainly your talk, but I just want to say that I understand exactly what you're saying. And I really think that we're going to run out of time. So that's why I want to end this before our time is
Sure.
up. And I would like to have you come back again, and we'll go into more if you have time and if you're willing.
Oh, sure. Well, thanks for having me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much. It was great.
Thanks for tuning in to the How Did We Get Here podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and family. For more information and to connect with Nancy, email howdidwegethere1884@gmail.com.